For the last several years, most of my work as a filmmaker has centered around travel, going to interesting places, and hopefully returning with images that show others a side of that place that they haven't seen or considered before. A little while back, I went to Norway to tell a story about ice, how massive ice sheets during the last ice age carved out Norway's landscape, and how you can actually go out and see evidence of that today. The main goal was to demonstrate this scientific concept, so that determined where I went, what subjects I captured, and how I captured them. I want to use this project as an example to share some of the techniques and approaches that help me to capture unique footage in new places, to make the most of the light and weather during a trip, to maximize the amount and variety of footage I can capture, and even to visit a place as popular as Norway and have the trails all to myself. On my first morning in Norway, I hiked out to the edge of a glacier where on my map I had seen what looked like prominent moraines, these weird hills that form at the edge of a glacier as it retreats. I found the moraines, but they weren't very noticeable on camera. I climbed on top of a few, which made for some better shots, but ultimately these turned out to be much more noticeable from above. That was ultimately how most of this trip went, either going out for a long drive or a hike and just keeping an eye out for these features that I'd read about and then setting up compositions that made those features obvious. The most obvious pieces of evidence that I needed to capture were these big boulders left behind as the ice sheets retreated. These are all over Norway, but you wouldn't necessarily think anything of them if you didn't know what to look for. So I tweaked my compositions to emphasize that these boulders are out of place, making sure to include the wide open spaces around them and their positions on the tops of hills or within forests and streams. And to drive home that these features were left behind by ice, I made sure to include some compositions framing them with the glaciers. Moraine with the glacier, boulders with the glacier, this long drone shot showing what's left of the glacier, and then this massive valley that it left behind. Norway's got big mountains and fjords, but they're impossible to miss, and most people have probably seen that image before. These features are a bit more obscure. They're kind of the only thing making this footage unique. So, to capture it, I need to lean into that and make sure that the way I'm shooting draws attention to it. Of course, I also need footage of the glaciers themselves. And I've made several videos about glaciers before, so I don't want to just capture the exact same footage again. I focused a lot this time on the water around the glaciers. Large waterfalls from their edges, lakes, this ice cave where the glacier was melting out, and I framed the glaciers within the context of the landscape they had created, like we talked about earlier. Glaciers are usually fairly tricky to access, and Norway's were no exception. They're thousands of feet above the valley floor, usually accessible only with a tough scramble, if they're really accessible at all. Part of my pre-production was just poking around trail maps, noting any and all trails that led right to the edge of a glacier. Here I could capture close-up footage of the glaciers and their features. These hikes to the edges of the ice ended up being the backbone of this trip and where I spent the biggest chunk of my time, but I also supplemented them with other footage that was easier to capture. That included telephoto footage shot using my Lumix 70-200 f2.8 and drone footage shot using the DJI Air 3. And that's a structure that I follow for just about everything that I make. These close-up, wide-angle shots are the most important, so I devote most of my time to capturing them, and I supplement those shots with telephoto and drone shots that allow me to capture a wide variety of additional footage fairly quickly. So if these close-up shots are so much more work, why prioritize them? Why not just shoot everything twice as fast with a drone and a long lens? It is a lot easier to shoot something when you don't have to walk all the way up to it, but these close-up shots place the viewer in the scene in a way that shots from several miles away or hundreds of feet above just can't. And with a travel and location-oriented project like this one of my biggest priorities is always going to be placing the viewer in the scene as immersively as I can, making you feel like you're actually there more than just looking at it from a distance. In Norway, in the summer, it's not quite a midnight sun, but the sun barely sets. There were only a couple hours of darkness, so I kind of just stayed up. I would shoot sunset, quickly regroup, then head right back out for sunrise. One night I had a big mountain I wanted to get up to the top of, so I left at midnight and just hiked all night so I could be at the top for sunrise. Summer this far north also means sunrise and sunset happen very slowly, which is obviously amazing for shooting. You can shoot way more footage in great lighting. We had a nice mix of clear and stormy weather, so I was able to capture very similar locations under completely different conditions. And in the edit, that meant that the tone of the project and location could change, starting out very dark and ominous, and eventually becoming very light and pretty, reflecting changes in the tone of the story. Time is limited when you're traveling, and chances are you want to make the most of it. So before I go anywhere, I take all of the locations I want to visit, all of the shots I want to capture, and sort them out by weather conditions. So if I'm doing a technical hike high in the mountains, I need clear weather to do that safely. Down in the valleys though, cloudy weather will make for more dramatic footage. And for other footage, like the moraines and boulders, the conditions don't really matter. I just need to get that shot of that specific thing. So once I'm on location, I can check the forecast and pretty quickly narrow down where I should go that day. I only had one clear sunrise while I was in Norway, so that was the day that I went up high. Just like the shoot, my color grade on this video aimed to emphasize these glacial features that we are focusing on. I used vignettes and masks to darken the edges of the frame and draw the eye toward the boulders, scratches, and moraines in the center. And I leaned into those contrasting weather conditions, both the beautiful sunrises and those dark, stormier days. And finally, Norway is one of the biggest destinations in the world, and I was visiting during peak season, so I came ready for crowds, ready to patiently wait for opportunities to shoot and carefully frame people out of my footage. So I was quite surprised when I hit the trails and there just wasn't really anyone out hiking. It probably helped that I was out hiking at such strange hours, but it also just seemed that people go to Norway to see big mountains and fjords and not so much glaciers and boulders. This is something I've experienced a lot the past few years. In the past, I would travel somewhere in hopes of capturing an image that I had seen before, probably on social media. But as soon as I started letting the topics and stories I was most interested in dictate where I went instead of the images, I wound up in more unique places I had never seen on social media. We did do the very popular photo cruise through the big fjords, and it was sick. I can understand why most would rather do that than, look at boulders. No matter what it is that gets you excited about a place, the big landscapes, the small details, the history, the people, the science, the boulders, wherever you go, there's something you will see that most others won't. Notice that, lean into it, follow it, and you will end up in unique places making unique films. Films that only you can make. And those are the ones worth making. I hope you've enjoyed this video, learned something new from it, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to Adorama TV for thousands of other videos just like this one, including a bunch of other videos in this series where we do the same thing. Go to cool places and take pretty pictures. Get your camera, go somewhere cool, make something cool, and I will see you in the next one.